Hi, everyone, and welcome to Auditing Design Systems for Accessibility. My name is Anna, and I use the pronouns she or they. I'm so happy to have you all join me, and I'm thrilled to join this group of speakers for Config 2021. A little bit about me. I'm a senior product designer at Recurly, and I'm also a master's student at the Atlas Institute of CU Boulder. In academia and industry alike, I've chosen to specialize in designing digital experiences that are as inclusive as possible, focusing on accessibility, which means that most of the time I look like this. Yes, I feel like I'm constantly flailing my arms and talking about inaccessibility. And here's why. As of last year, 98% of the web had accessibility issues. Think about it. Just last year, the vast majority of web experiences weren't really accessible to disabled people. That's at least 50 to 25% of the global population. And let me ask you, if you knew you were underserving that many of your users or losing out on that many opportunities, would you accept that? Or would you do everything in your power to change it? You'd change it. We'd all change it because as designers, we seek to serve our users' needs. That's why we're here. Because we want to design like we give a damn. And we know that there are consequences to everything we create. Every day, as designers, we make choices that impacts people all over the world. We see the impacts of those choices in software and websites, but we can also see those systemic impacts of inaccessibility everywhere. And aren't we designers because we want to change the world and to make it better? We want our work to have a positive impact. We want our work to make a difference in people's lives. And we have the power to create that change by making our work more inclusive. But inclusive design is also just better design. And accessibility is a form of inclusive design that focuses on disabled users. In fact, innovations like telephones, email, and text-to-speech tools like Siri were all originally designed with disabled people in mind. Or for a more recent example, we can look at Nike's new Go Fly E sneakers, designed to allow people to put their shoes on without needing to use their hands or having to bend over. A few years ago, 16-year-old Matthew Walzer wrote a letter to Nike's design director asking for a shoe he could put on independently with his cerebral palsy. Walzer wrote, "My dream is to go to the college of my choice without having to worry about someone coming to tie my shoes every day." And once Nike received this letter, they began developing the sneaker in partnership with Walzer and delivered their first release of the product just a few months ago. These shoes have become popular for many people with a range of disabilities or situations because their design enables ease of use for all. In most situations, there's no need to differentiate between usability and accessibility because their goals are complementary. Inclusive design pushes us to think past our expectations. It allows us to ask what our designs can afford all rather than some. Accessible designs are also better for everyone because many of us are disabled or will become disabled in our lives. Accessibility isn't just for some ambiguous and unknown user, it's for our friends, our families, ourselves. The persona spectrum shown here, sourced from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit, shows how accessibility can help people with permanent disabilities such as blindness, temporary disabilities such as cataracts, and even situational disabilities like distracted driving. The same logic can be applied to our users who can be experiencing a range of situations that affect how they interact with our sites and products at any given time. Just a few weeks ago, I was trying to watch a tutorial video, but I couldn't because my background was noisy and the video had no captions. Accessibility isn't a special need. It's just a need. It's not an case. It's for functionality. We have disabled users now, and we're going to have them as long as there are people. Not only that, but accessibility is a fundamental human right. People use our products to get healthcare, pay bills, get jobs, and yes, have fun. It's not a matter of accommodation when the designs we put out in the world might be the only way people have access. A lot of us are working on getting our COVID vaccines right now, but what happens when sites used to register to get those vaccines aren't accessible? What happens when the real-time election data site isn't accessible? We, as designers, create disability when we design without accessibility in mind. People feel that exclusion. They become disempowered by our inaction. Everyone we exclude becomes disabled. But we also have the power to make work that's more inclusive now, more accessible, and more usable by building in accessibility at scale. We are in a time when accessibility is easier to build in than ever. We can make things better. Now, you might be wondering how we might implement accessibility at scale. Many people have the perception that accessibility takes a lot of extra time and money, but actually accessibility is easier to do than you might think and cheaper than the alternatives like doubling back on work, accessibility lawsuits, bad UX, and a poor reputation. Retrofitting web experiences to be accessible is far more expensive than it is to build them accessibly in the first place. Many components written and created without regard to accessibility need to be redesigned and rebuilt. This is what really amplifies costs and creates the myth that accessibility is too costly to include by default. Considering accessibility sooner saves time, money, and effort later while also building a better user experience. And since 67% of accessibility issues originate in design with us, we can resolve the vast majority of issues most easily by scaling accessible design to start with. And where do designers scale our work best? Design systems. If we scale design in design systems, doesn't it make sense, the most sense, I should say, to scale accessibility in these systems as well? The best design systems have baked in accessibility, from their UX all the way to their development and their documentation. Systems like IBM's Carbon, Shopify's Polaris, more industry-leading design systems have created components thinking about accessibility. But you don't have to have a perfect or brand new design system to scale accessibility. Many of us work on design systems with a combination of live components, in-flight components, and even components that are live but undocumented. So how can we use design systems to scale accessibility even when they're imperfect? This is where our audit comes in. When we have design systems with accessible components, we empower our teams to make products that are far more accessible by default. But before we make our work more accessible, we need to understand how accessible our system is now and how far we need to go. We need our design system to be audited and understood for us to integrate accessibility. Auditing for accessibility can be applied when designing, developing, documenting, or capturing any of your components in your design system. It can happen at any time or at any scale. Accessibility audit within your design system begins just like a design system audit. You start by deciding how much do you want to review? What's your timeline? Auditing can be used on a single component, related components, or a whole system of components. It's all about how you want to approach it and the resources you have within time. You could literally do an audit on a single button and still get actual results. Just make sure that you're aware of the limitations of your scope and that you clarify that with the team before you start. The next step is to capture what exists for what you're auditing. You can do this by referencing your design files, your development libraries, and your live experience, or anything in between, as long as you're capturing what exists or what is intended to be made. This should also include things such as different interaction states like hover and focus. And this part of your process is simply about knowing what your users are interacting with and making sure that you can understand how much a component impacts your system holistically. For example, our buttons in the audit shown here are going to have bigger impacts on our users because they're a core component used across our experience. Other components may still have big impacts. They're used for used for essential interactions like the ability to log in. In the last part of our system audit, we want to make sure that what we measured is across all parts of our experience, and to note any instances that are standalone or unique. We need to make sure that these buttons in Figma are consistent with what's in the development library, and that these are also consistent with what's live. When we've captured what exists across our system, we can then better understand each variant's purpose. In the screen shown here, we've noted the intended purposes are not based on descriptors like blue or red, but instead focus on purposes such as primary call to action or destructive action. Again, the purpose of capturing these components is to audit the system itself first, see what it exists so that we can be as informed as possible about the component. Building this frame of reference will set the stage for scaling accessibility. Everything we've just discussed for a design system audit directly into accessibility auditing. We can't audit for accessibility unless we understand what exists in our system as a whole, the purpose of those components, and the impact they might have on our users. Then we can bake in accessibility into our design system and into our design and redesign of our components. Auditing design system accessibility is kind of like making a cake using a cake recipe. You'll start with dry mix and you'll add your ingredients in. And if the recipe calls for you to add an egg to your mix, accessibility in this metaphor, you can't just crack an egg on top of the baked cake and get the result you want. Baking in accessibility ensures your system addresses usability holistically. So how do we review our components for accessibility? When it comes to following accessibility practices online, the best place to start is with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. Many designers ask me for accessibility checklists that they can use. Well, WCAG is the ultimate accessibility checklist. WCAG is a set of specific standards designed to make the web more accessible to people with disabilities. It's written with and by disabled people. This guide can evaluate marketing websites, blogs, apps, and really anything that can be accessed digitally. The principles can even be broken into game design. WCAG is broken into 4 guiding principles saying that web content must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. These principles contain each of our guidelines categories, while each guideline tells us what we need to do, how to do it, and the level of accessibility we meet when addressing it. To help us understand what guidelines are most essential, every guideline has a rating of A, AA, or AAA. The A to AAA levels, the level of compliance met with each guideline. Essentially, an A rating is the bare minimum, a AA rating is good, and a AAA rating is amazing. When you're auditing, you'll want to pick what level you seek to meet with your review, then use that as a guide for assessing the impact of your findings. For reference, most organizations choose AA as their bare minimum compliance level. And as a call out here, there's experience entirely AAA compliant in every category or every location. Most experiences most experiences have a range of accessibility compliance levels, and different pieces factor into our design accessibility, such as what's on a page or what components being used. To provide some context, I've broken out compliance levels using color contrast on a button as an example. We have 4 different buttons in different shades of gray on a dark background and then on a light background. The rating on these shows if the contrast is high enough to be legible. As you can see, or rather not see, the first button on the left on the dark background does not meet acceptance levels. That same button has a AAA rating on a light background, and we can see similar instances depending on how the color is applied. WCAG color contrast compliance indicated in guidelines 1.4.3 and 1.4.6 only has AA and AAA levels. Ideally, we want to meet AAA, but AA works well. We could also increase our compliance level by increasing our font size or the font weight. So how we apply WCAG and what guidelines we consider essential really depends on our goals and the components themselves. This is part of why I tend to recommend looking at these types of considerations from a component level, because that's using your design systems first. It's easy to scale accessibility when we apply it in that context. So now we have our components documented by purpose and variants accounted for. We take each component and review it with WCAG. This might sound like a task, but in most cases, it's not as big as you might think. Some WCAG will be more relevant to a component than others. For example, we don't need to be thinking about closed captions for our button design, but reviewing our button with WCAG will show us that we should be thinking about color contrast, color usage, focus logic, semantic purpose, and more. Then knowing what we need to account for from these guidelines, we can start to ask ourselves where gaps may exist and opportunities to make components better. Pair this with direct feedback from our users, particularly our disabled users, and we can have a strong idea of the components that we can fix with the least effort and the most impact. You might be wondering what parts of WCAG most commonly come up when auditing our design systems, or perhaps you're thinking that WCAG is meant for developers more so than designers, but remember, 67% of accessibility issues originate in design. Many items in WCAG relate to design just as much as they do development. So some common accessibility requirements that need to be outlined in design include color usage, content strategy, heading structure, link behaviors, hover and form behaviors, everything on this list and more. I've included a link to my favorite WCAG quick reference. It includes all of these items and more, as well as ways to meet these guidelines. The quick reference is also super easy when you're doing your audit and running components through review, because essentially it's a big list and you can just kind of run through it and check your items, a checklist, so to speak. You might be thinking, doesn't WCAG only for design really only apply to color contrast or like UI elements? But okay, let's talk about that. Accessibility that's within our design systems are not just about color contrast, and they're not just about UI alone. As we discussed, much of accessibility lies in other parts of our system, including content, hierarchy, imagery, and much more. And while UI accessibility does matter, one of the reasons designers tend to think responsibility to accessibility is focused mostly on color type is because we don't realize how closely UX is tied to accessibility. So let's review a component together, being past you. This alert component is designed to have a set of different messages: success, warning, information, and error. There are a couple of UX items we can investigate with alert. For example, we can ask ourselves, how is the meaning of this alert indicated to blind users? Since we have icons in these alerts and icons can have alt text, perhaps we want to use these icons to convey meaning. So in our accessibility audit, we can note that there's no alt text being used for these icons, relating it to WCAG 1.1.1 non-text content. Then make a suggestion as to what alt text we might use to help clarify that meaning. If we're using these icons elsewhere with similar purposes, this in our audit will also help us scale that text consideration to many different instances. Let's say with this alert and the error instance that we're showing multiple alerts within one container. We'll need to ask if this alert is clearly identifying what errors need to be fixed, where the errors are, and how they can be fixed. If the user doesn't know how to do these things, or can't understand how to do these things using the existing component or how it's currently structured, we can note that it's an issue and relate it to CAG 3.3.1, error identification. Imagine for a moment that you are using a screen reader to navigate a page, and for some reason there's an error. If the errors are shown by which appear logically within the page, that will help you fix them more quickly. So it's something to think about. These are just some of the questions that we as designers can and should be asking ourselves when we look at existing components and build new ones. If we have these components lined up together and a reference for the context, it can be easier for us to understand potential accessibility gaps and add them to our audit. And let's touch base on code too. Because while we can fix 67% of issues in design, like all accessibility, our work does not start or stop in one team. While we've gone through reviewing component designs for accessibility, we haven't talked about code yet, and it's important that we do. If our components are live or in a component library, we'll want to review their code as well. I know some of us designers may cringe at the idea of reviewing code, but we don't have to be a developer to audit or check accessibility issues in our development. To review code, we can partner with developers directly, or we can even take a pass using tools that enable us to audit code on pages or on specific components. We can use Chrome's Lighthouse or DQ's Axe, or many other plugins that automatically detect issues in code, then review those issues to ensure they're good, and add additional issues that aren't captured in the automated checker itself. Even though I'm not a developer, I found tools like these to be really helpful when reviewing code, and even just to have a discussion with a developer to say, hey, is this what's supposed to be happening? And having that discussion helps me learn, and it helps set them in the mind frame of, can we do this more accessibly? I've learned a lot just by trying these out, so I recommend it, even if you're not comfortable with code. It's a super handy way to get yourself ingrained in that thinking. So what happens when an audit is done? Accessibility in an organization can't stop or start with design, as we discussed. So it's important to share our findings with others. And if we reviewed design, code, or a combination of these two, it'll make it very easy for us to talk through issues as a team. We should out what is most critical to fix, key themes to help our team identify which issues can be fixed most quickly with the highest impact. Combining this with a breakdown of the component and a description of why the issue occurs will help us not only explain what we found, but it will also set us up to make fixes. Putting these together along with our complete audit means that we can share results in a digestible and work with stakeholders to prioritize improvements. Personally, I find that conversations are the most significant parts of building an accessibility advocacy group or having any level of accessibility advocacy within your organization. When we approach these conversations with an open mind and willingness to discuss, others within our team will welcome that and learn with us. And this is super important because design and accessibility within development, as a community, we tend to treat it very, what's the word I'm looking for? We can be a little defensive sometimes. And so those conversations helps us change our culture and our community to think, not even think more accessibly, but to think that we should be thinking more accessibly. Finally, I know our time together is brief, and I think there's a good chance many of you out there are saying, okay, I want to do this, but I don't completely understand it. So I want to close our time together by reminding you of what I said at the beginning. 98% of experiences just last year were not really accessible to disabled users. So if you're sitting there intimidated by this or doubtful about what you can do, I want to say this. You don't have to be perfect to make an impact. Every single effort you make to make your designs more accessible is better than doing nothing. Every time you do accessibility, you empower your team to do the same. Every time you have a conversation or ask a question, educate yourself and your team. Those conversations make us less afraid to push for accessibility, and they make us less defensive when we need to improve. You don't have to be an accessibility expert to advocate for accessibility. You don't have to understand everything about accessibility, design like you give a damn. With that, I want to thank you all for coming to Config and for watching my talk today. I want to encourage folks to reach out to me and ask the questions that you have as you dig deeper into your accessibility education. Don't be afraid to ask questions or share what you're learning elsewhere too, because even considerations outside of the organization are important. All of us are learning all the time. That's literally what we do. We're in tech. So if you'd like to do so, follow me on Twitter at Anna E. Cook. That's ANNAECOOK. I'll be sharing more resources, answering more questions, and hanging out there if you want to connect after this.